Since the dawn of sci-fi, space has been an integral part of the genre. Depictions of space have changed over the years to match our knowledge in the field. The first ever story to represent space in a science fiction story is Johannes Kepler's Somnium, where shadow demons take humans on a trip to the moon through the aether or sky. The moon, or Levania, is a spherical object with two hemispheres which we now refer to as the far and near side of the moon. The human characters in the story had to be sedated to survive the trip through the aether, which was known to be cold. Kepler used the available knowledge of astronomy and physics, some of which he discovered, in a detailed description of how the Earth may look when viewed from the moon in order to defend Copernicus's theories on the movement of celestial objects. Despite the usage of mythical creatures in the narrative, it was the most realistic depiction of space travel for a very long time. Now, Somnium was written in 1608, and since then our understanding of space has changed. As a result, the way we look at space in fiction has also changed. With a better understanding of gravity in space, we got stories like Rendezvous with Rama in 1973, which depicts how an alien artifact, when spinning, can generate its own gravity via centripetal force. One of my favorite aspects of science fiction is its ability to ground fantastical ideas in hard reality, which is why my favorite branch of science fiction is hard sci-fi, the branch which has concern for scientific accuracy. Rendezvous with Rama, Project Hail Mary, The Martian, and The Expanse are all examples of hard sci-fi, and I highly recommend checking all of them out. But for this video, I'll be talking about the depiction of space in The Expanse, a show set 325 years into the future where humans have colonized Mars and have been mining the asteroid belt for generations. The humans in that world live as the Earthers, the Martians, and the Belters. The show depicts the events that follow the discovery of alien life in the solar system.
I have a file with 900 pages of analysis and contingency plans for war with Mars. My file for what to do if an advanced alien species comes calling. It's 3 pages long, and it begins with Step 1, find God.
So without any further ado, here's the video. This video will be divided into sections. Each section will have only a couple of examples of how that particular aspect is depicted with realism, because if I sat here and mentioned every single time the show depicted something with realism, this video would be far too long. Now, there's plenty of realism to be found in other aspects of the show, such as the biology and the politics, but
don't talk down to me, plant guy.
I'll be primarily focusing on the use of realistic physics in the show. On land, our movement is not very complicated. Trust me, man, I've tried it. We don't have to worry about the influence of gravity while walking around since we're accustomed to 1G environments. There's a ground beneath your feet, and we describe movements with directions common to everyone. In space, however, up and down are difficult to describe. Sure, you can say that the planet below is technically down, but that's not very useful for the microgravity conditions a spacecraft travels in. Directions of movement above ground are relative to the craft itself. Roll, pitch, and yaw are the 3 ways to control where a craft faces in space. Roll is the rotation of the craft along its axis. Pitch and yaw are front to back and side to side rotations. A careful combination of them points the craft in the right direction to aim its thrust. Movement, or locomotion through space, happens in the form of arcs, similar to how if we throw a rock into the air, it follows an arc before touching the ground. The faster you fly into the air, the longer it takes for you to reach the ground. Once you reach a certain velocity at which the force pulling you down and the force pushing you up are equalized, you fall into orbit. Objects orbit the Earth at roughly 107,000 kilometers an hour or 30 kilometers a second. Now that the basics of movement in space are covered, I'd like to talk about momentum. More specifically about how momentum is used to maneuver in space. In space, a maneuver that's used to increase velocity is the gravitational slingshot, or a gravity assist primer. As planets travel around the sun, they have their own momentum. A craft, which also carries its own momentum, when swinging by a planet will acquire a part of the planet's momentum and as a result go faster into space once it finishes swinging by. These moves must be carefully planned, as a miscalculation may result in the planet's gravity capturing the craft and turning it into an orbiting satellite. These maneuvers are heavily featured in The Expanse. In the belt, slingshotting is an illegal extreme sport where racers participate in increasingly difficult and lengthy maneuvers to become the fastest. When stories present a world that is different from our own, I find the world more believable when aspects of life such as sports, food, music, and hobbies are introduced, which is a part of what I appreciate in this aspect of the show. It integrates the concept of gravity assist slingshots naturally into the story. It's also used by one of the main characters to pass through an area undetected by Earth and Mars' militia. The character, Alex Kamal, uses the moons of Jupiter to traverse across Jupiter's space without the use of his primary engine, building momentum through half his journey and then using those moons' gravity to slow down towards his target. In both cases, there is a use of automated calculation of arcs and trajectories by onboard computers, which can be adjusted by the pilot. The technology is a natural evolution of our current day computer systems, which increases its believability. In later seasons of the show, one of the villains, Marco Inaros, uses advanced slingshot maneuvers to direct small asteroids at Earth as a strategy in war, the effect of which is devastating to Earth. These maneuvers are used to both increase the speed of the asteroid prior to impact and to fly under Earth's early warning systems. The transfer of momentum in space also has other applications. In the microgravity conditions of space, once an object starts moving, there is no atmospheric drag to slow it down, which is why the object's velocity remains a constant unless acted on by another object. In Season 2, to stop a runaway asteroid from hitting Earth, a large space station is directed towards it in order to change its trajectory to ensure that it hits the Sun instead. The momentum of the craft, Medina Station, would be transferred to the asteroid along the direction of the station's movement. This maneuver also leads to one of the most shocking twists in the show, and I highly recommend it you see it for yourself. In late Season 2, a slingshotter attempts to pass through a ringed alien structure to set a new record. However, since the ring rapidly slows down anything traveling too fast through it, the craft loses a majority of its momentum in an instant, since it was traveling at interplanetary velocities of the order 10 to the power 6 km per hour and brought down to roughly 18,000 km an hour. The pilot is still traveling at interplanetary velocities while being harnessed to a ship that underwent a rapid slowdown. The result is messy. Overall, the show uses momentum of spacecraft in realistic, unique, and often clever ways to move its plot forward. Momentum, however, is not the only thing the show depicts with realism. Wireless communication happens via electromagnetic waves which travel at light speed. Light, despite being unreasonably fast, still takes time to travel. The time delay between sending and receiving on Earth is negligible, which is why talking to someone on the other side of the planet is effectively instantaneous. However, the further you travel into space, the longer signals take to travel. Light takes 8 minutes to travel from the Sun to Earth. Depending on where the planets are, light takes 3 to 22 minutes to travel between Earth and Mars. That delay only increases the further you travel into the solar system. Throughout the first 2 seasons, the characters leading the UN on Earth have to factor in the time delay between their orders and their troops' response in Jupiter's area of operations during an active war, often needing to come up with strategies that don't involve immediate communication with the fleet. Significant events happening in Jupiter AO come to the UN's attention 20 minutes after the event has already taken place.
God damn it, I want to know what the hell is going on out there, and now.
Transmission delay to the AO was 39 plus minutes. I'll let you know the moment we have contact.
We need to talk to Admiral Wynn.
In Season 4 of the show, where alien ring artifacts have opened wormholes to 1300 extrasolar systems, communication relays are placed along the ring gates since direct communication with Sol system from those systems would be virtually impossible, considering the distance signals need to travel between star systems and how long they'd need to travel without interference.
We heard from them again. The builders have been installing comm relays through the ring gates, prioritizing those 4 systems.
Earlier in Season 4, there is a depiction of real-time communication between Alex Kamal and his friend Bobby Draper. This conversation is quickly cut off as the ship Alex is traveling on is moving fast enough to slowly build the time delay between each of their sentences.
Shit, delay's getting bad.
Shit. Take care of yourself, flyboy.
You too, Bobby.
Finally, in Season 3, Medina Station is shown to have a communication laser, which, if the station flew into interstellar space, would be used to communicate with Sol system through vast distances without interference. This technology is a natural evolution of laser-based communication used by present-day NASA and the ESA. In 2005, the Messenger space probe used a neodymium laser to communicate across a distance of 24 million kilometers as it flew by Earth. The laser used had a power of 250 megawatts, powerful enough to permanently blind humans, and was used to send a signal over a relatively small distance. A laser powerful enough to communicate over hundreds of light years would need to be that much more powerful, which is why the same technology present aboard Medina Station is quickly retrofitted to a weapon in Season 3. Just as how momentum is depicted in unique ways to push the story forward, so is communication technology. Yes! Oh, that is awesome. Love it. Woo! Nice spaceship! Yes! Yes! Kill it! I'm sorry. The Expanse's space battles are one of the most unique aspects of the show. They use realism in communication, movement, and momentum to create insanely engaging and satisfying ship-to-ship fights. Paddling craft will often follow arcs when no longer in acceleration. Characters need to be strapped into crash couches and injected with adrenaline cocktails in order to maintain the pressures of high G during acceleration. When a craft is blown open, its debris can easily fly into nearby vessels, which increases the stakes and risks involved in each mission. When characters free fall out of an airlock, they maintain the spin they flew out with. These are just minor details in many of these battles, by the way. Now, the weapons used during these battles are varied. PDCs, or point defense cannons, are rapid-fire projectile weapons often used to take out incoming missiles. These weapons act as a shield for the ship and are commonly seen laid out over the ship's surface to cover all angles of incoming fire. These weapons are controlled by automated defense software since a human, even juiced up on adrenaline, cannot keep track of fast targets. PDCs are short-range weapons, and since these ships are traveling large distances, the further you are from a ship, the harder it gets to effectively use PDCs. In later seasons, the ship used by the main characters, the Rocinante, acquires a Railgun, a powerful ship-to-ship weapon that uses the Lorentz effect and magnetism to accelerate a metal slug to high speeds. The Lorentz effect is a combination of electrical and magnetic force on a charged body due to electromagnetic fields. These weapons are analogous to long-range rifles for spacecraft. As a result of Newton's first law, the range of these railguns against slow-moving targets is effectively endless, which is why the UN Navy on Earth uses them to destroy a Martian stealth ship in a completely different part of the solar system. This example will contain spoilers for Season 6 of The Expanse. In Season 6, the slow zone that the ring gates unlock contains an object at its center which remains perfectly motionless with effectively infinite inertia. To take advantage of its seemingly impossible position, Marco Inaros' Free Navy mounts a series of railguns over its surface, covering all angles in order to dominate any force that dared to threaten him within the bounds of this region. These railguns, unlike previous appearances, are 150 meters in length and have an extremely high fire rate, proving to be one of the most effective weapons used in the show. Finally, there are missiles or torpedoes, self-propelled weapons with explosive warheads that detonate on contact with its target. Now, I don't really have too much to say on the missiles on the show, but I think their launching animation is very neat, similar to the Javelin missile launcher of today. In Season 1, there's a battle to capture a spinning space station which is guarded by a frigate. The protagonists, Jim Holden, Naomi Nagata, Alex Kamal, and Amos Burton, aboard the Rocinante, have to first appear as a broken-off piece of cargo to avoid suspicion while approaching the station. Behind the Roci, two sets of surviving skiffs with strike teams fly in its shadow to avoid detection. Once close enough, the frigate defending the station fired on the skiffs, which forces the Roci into close-range battle in a scene that displays the power of the PDCs really well. Watching rounds pierce through the ship and fly cleanly through it, barely missing the people aboard, shows just how dangerous the situation is. A nice detail is that the sparks that the PDC rounds leave fall down once the ship is under high acceleration. Another neat detail is the spiraling patterns the PDC rounds produce when they reposition themselves. The PDC rounds do significant damage to the Roci's engines, which then have to be repaired mid-battle. The Roci hides behind the station to safely conduct repairs. During this close-range battle, one of the two skiffs is destroyed, leaving only one to capture the space station. To save the second skiff from being destroyed by the station's defenses, Alex warns Amos to prepare himself for high-G maneuvers while outside his crash couch, and destroys the cannon before surprising the frigate with PDCs, leading to the capture of the station. The battle as a whole is a great demonstration of the danger of space battles in that universe, and the power of close-range weapons being used. The battle also weighs heavily on Alex, which combined with survivor's guilt leads him to obsess over how he could have done better. Alex is later revealed to have a family on Mars that he feels he has abandoned, which explains his high levels of concern for his newfound family and crew.
What on about? Our family is falling apart.
It's a wonderful balance of realistic mechanics, spectacle, and character work. In Season 6, I know I jumped a little, but if I talk about every single space battle I like in this show, we would be here for ages. The Roci enters a sudden chase with Marco Inaros, who at the time has influenced his son that he had with Naomi into joining his army. Inaros' ship, the Pella, is a powerful freighter armed to the teeth with missiles. Marco coerces his son Philip into firing missiles at the Roci as a test of his loyalty, which Philip passes. The missiles are quickly destroyed by the Roci, but the Pella is rapidly closing in. Holden, out of desperation, fires a railgun round after rapidly turning his ship around. The shot hits one of the ships guarding the Pella, which is quickly brushed aside by Marco as he shows his true priorities by egging Philip to fire on the Roci once more. He complies, but misses once more. The Roci fires another railgun shot using its 360 no-scope maneuver, which the Pella dodges. The ship's PDCs also begin to misfire, which Amos has to fix. Bobby, who is co-piloting the ship, suggests firing another round to see which direction the Pella dodges, and firing once more in that direction. To ensure hitting the Pella, PDC rounds are aimed at the original direction of fire. The maneuver is successful and the Pella is disabled, but when it came time to destroy it, Holden hesitates once seeing Philip on screen. He spares them, deciding he could not bring harm to Naomi's son. The move allows Marco to run free for longer and causes friction between Holden's crew members, but shows how principled the character of Holden had become by that point, not willing to kill someone he views as innocent in order to bring down a far greater threat. A scenario that's explored many times during the 6 seasons.
Have you heard of Genghis Khan? He built one of the greatest empires in human history, killed or displaced a quarter of the entire population on Earth during his conquests. Today, that's the equivalent of 10 billion people. Eris is hardly a rounding error by comparison.
And that justifies all this.
Of course it does. So we have an understanding.
We're all just walking in the footsteps of history. The ancient frontier. All those post offices and railroads and jails. Cost thousands of lives to build. This is no different. You should have stayed at home till I built a post office.
I met another guy once who liked using past genocides to justify his bullshit.
You weren't persuaded?
A friend of mine shot him in the face.
The scene also demonstrates Marco's vengefulness and willingness to sacrifice anyone as long as he wins the war he's waging. Holden sparing Philip is something Philip is unaware of, but his continued survival leads him to see how much of a monster his father is, which eventually ends with Philip abandoning the Pella and inadvertently saving his own life, escaping from the manipulating influence of Marco. Once the war is won and the Pella is destroyed along with Marco, Naomi grieves the death of her son, not knowing that he survived. Holden wonders if he made the right choices during the season, which Naomi, in the show's final scene, cannot assure him of, but instead says that it is far more important that he tries to help people than knowing that he did. That the universe never tells anyone whether they did the right thing, nor does it tell anyone of the effect they have on people. But it's still important to do the right thing, because your actions may be haunting or encouraging with very little way of knowing for sure. She could never know if she had an effect on Philip during her time with him in Season 5, but it did not stop her from comforting him despite the presence of his monstrous father. Holden could never know if sparing Philip led to his survival, but he could not inflict the pain of losing Philip in such a scenario, nor could he end the life of someone who he believes is a victim in this conflict. Naomi's final monologue shows how deeply the two characters are connected and ends the show on a really bittersweet note. Now, as much as I'd like to continue talking about the characters in the show, I may have strayed from the topic at hand for a little too long. The Roci versus the Pella, while only a moderate demonstration of the show's realism mechanics, is a fantastic scene for the show's characters to develop. My favorite payoffs in the final season stem from this battle. Overall, I absolutely adore the space battles in the show. It's an incredible mix of real-world physics, spectacle, and character moments. The water here bounces around the glass because they're in lunar gravity. One shot in space, people in spacesuits' upper body loosens up, and they appear to float while their feet are held to the ground because of magnetic boots. This spacecraft follows a gradual arc while deorbiting, similar to how real spacecraft make their landing. The sun over the horizon on Mars is blue in color as it is in real life, since the Martian atmosphere scatters different wavelengths of light than ours. As a maneuver in battle, ships even use their drive flumes to damage another ship. When in the slow zone, due to the reduction of speed, several people aboard Medina Station are injured. However, since blood doesn't clot in space the same way it clots on Earth,
Without gravity, wounds can't drain. Blood pools and clots, tissue swells, and any internal bleeding is a death sentence.
doctors aren't able to help the injured easily, forcing Medina Station into spinning its drum to simulate gravity.
Spin the drum! Effective gravity at inner surface. 1 ton G!
The identification of ships happens via both its transponder codes and its drive signature, the exact configuration of an engine a ship uses that's tied to its registry. To go under the radar, people can change transponder codes easily, but have to dump material like cobalt into their engine to change the ship's drive signature temporarily.
I tweaked the engines to burn hot and dirty. As long as no one gets too close, we'll just look like another shitty freighter.
When you're done, have Alex power down the comms array for silent running.
Roger that.
I know I mentioned this earlier, but due to how easily people can be knocked out during high G acceleration, they are injected with the juice, a mixture of adrenaline, blood vessel reinforcers, and blood thinners to help reduce the effects of crushing G-forces. The show also depicts how people living on different planets adjust to Earth-like environments. Bobby, a citizen of Mars, upon landing on Earth, is forced to orient herself with a wider horizon and a wide sky. Her only desire on Earth, apart from her mission, is to see the ocean for the first time, since it's something many Martians like her dream to see on Mars. In Season 4, Naomi, having never been on a planet before, has to take gravity drugs to build her bone density and muscle strength to even survive 1G environments. In one of the darker moments of the show, the UN Undersecretary, Christian Avasarala, is shown to use gravity torture, an illegal method of extracting information, on a belter whose bones and muscles are too brittle and weak for Earth's gravity. A part of the belter's body is immersed in water to ensure that he lives through the procedure. Now, that may not have been the most cheerful note to end this section on, but on we go. Going back to the Somnium example, science fiction can often show how scientifically advanced a given group is based on what is extensively depicted in their fiction. It can be a historical landmark in that sense, and stories like The Expanse, The Martian, and Rendezvous with Rama show a clear contrast between stories from the dawn of the genre in accordance with the change in understanding of space. Now, of course, science fiction is a wide genre, and realism in sci-fi is not a necessity, but I believe it helps the believability of the world. When a story needs you to suspend your disbelief for the ancient alien artifacts, the all-consuming extraterrestrial goo, and the ability to destroy entire planetary systems with ease, it helps when all said aspects of the show are grounded in real-world science. It helps people who aren't even familiar with the science understand the stakes of the story easier. When a character flying in a spaceship is hit by enemy fire, seeing bullets fly through the cockpit makes it easier for you to believe that those characters aren't separate from the environment they're being presented in. The audience may even be introduced to the effects and applications of science through the show. Prior to watching the show, I never thought about how someone living on Mars or floating in space cities would need to adjust to Earth's horizon and gravity. Forget using that same mechanic as a method for torture. Oh my god. I had never thought of how gravitational slingshots could be used for both defense and attack in space. The show and books that spawned it have a creative demonstrations of a number of scientific concepts weaved naturally into the story. Aside from the witty and likable characters, the fascinating world, and the slow-burning plot that I was completely immersed in, I enjoy the realism aspect of the show thoroughly. It's a wonderful stimulant for the imagination, and it never becomes tedious. I hope we get more of it, and I'm really annoyed that the show was cancelled. As soon as it ended, I read the 3 books left to be adapted, and I loved every single page. There's quite the story left to be told, and I highly recommend you complete the entire series. I do hope the show makes a return, but if that doesn't happen, I'm still quite happy with the 6 seasons we got. Oi dang, Kopeng. I tried. Well, that was fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. The images flashing by on screen right now are other things that I've worked on, and I have the links to them in the description below if you're interested. Until next time then, bye bye.